listener production.
Hello, Sasha Barbagat with you. Welcome to The Briefing. Slashing student debt is leading the charge in the Albanese government's 2025 election pitch, with 20% loan reductions on the horizon. But some say the proposals just don't go far enough, instead calling on higher education in Australia to become free again. But is that something we can do or even afford?
Here's the economic reality, right? You won't hear politicians say this. We can have anything we want.
Yeah, that interesting chat coming up in the second half of this episode. First, though, it's time for the headlines with Chris Spyrou on Monday, November 11.
Morning, Sash. Morning, everybody. We start this morning in the US, where Donald Trump has completed his sweep of all 7 battleground states. The Republican nominee had already secured the 270 electoral college votes needed to win the presidency by early Thursday our time. And after winning Arizona yesterday and Nevada on Saturday, it's expected his final count will sit at 312 to Kamala Harris's 226. It's a massive turnaround from his last election in 2020, where Joe Biden won 6 of the 7 swing states, Sash.
Yeah, and the president-elect over the weekend has also given us some insight into who will be part of his second administration. And what his transition team is doing now is kind of vetting candidates ahead of his White House return, which happens on January 20. He's already made his first official appointment, announcing his campaign co-chair, Susie Wiles, as his chief of staff. And she'll become the first woman to hold the role in US history.
Susie likes to stay sort of in the back, let me tell you. The Ice Maiden, we call her the Ice Maiden.
Yeah, as you heard there, he likes to call her the Ice Maiden, and that's because of her supposed unflappable temperament.
Yeah, it's also expected he will find a place for the world's richest man, tech mogul Elon Musk, in his administration, as well as appoint vaccine skeptic and conspiracy theorist Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to a key health role. RFK, as he's commonly referred to, he's a descendant of JFK, he's his nephew, and he also ran to be president as an independent. Kennedy, he's already signalled he will remove fluoride from drinking water, though the role in the administration and his plans to actually do that remain incredibly vague at the moment, Sash.
Yeah, unsurprising that one. Look, back home a new poll has showed 40% of Australians think Trump will be bad for us in terms of our economy and our security, but 29% of those responding to the survey for 9 newspapers welcomed the victory, thinking it's good for Australia. Questions, meantime, do remain about how we should respond if Trump imposes tariffs on Australian exports. We know he wants to do it with China and I believe Mexico as well, but there's a question about whether he will do it to Australia too. 46% in that survey said the government should put tariffs on US exports in return. The tariff plan is one that's going to be interesting, Chris, because I think people thought, you know, if you don't understand how tariffs work, they thought, oh, we're imposing that tax on China or on Mexico. They have to pay to import the goods into the US. No, if you are importing the goods yourself, say you sell T-shirts and those T-shirts are manufactured in China, you pay the tariff, which means that if you're a business owner in America trying to get Chinese imports, you're either going to be priced out or you're going to be paying more, and then everything else goes up. So people may have misunderstood, not everyone, but there'd be a lot of people who perhaps misunderstood what that policy actually means.
Sales for electric cars have fallen sharply in Australia as buyers opt for hybrid models instead. The last quarter's sales data put out by the Australian Automobile Association has revealed petrol-powered cars continue to decline in popularity, with sales falling by 9% in the 3 months to October. But the fall was even greater for EVs, which dropped a whopping 25%, with market share falling to 6.5%, the lowest since 2022. Hybrid sales, though, were up a little over 3%, while plug-in hybrids soared a massive 56% to make 2.5% of the market share.
Lots of percentages and lots of numbers there, but essentially hybrids up and everything else down.
Yeah.
Why are we seeing these trends is the next question. Well, the AAA predicts it's down to the government rebates on EVs ending in all states except WA. And the cost of living likely isn't helping either, because the cheapest EV on the market right now is an MG. It's $31,000. And remember, there aren't many, if any, electric cars going secondhand. I was in the market to buy a car a few years ago, and I would have really liked to have looked at electric cars, but I was buying a secondhand, and there just aren't any secondhand EVs on the market because they're too new, and the way that they work is that they actually last a lot longer than petrol cars do. I do want to make the point, though, the head of legal policy and advocacy at a body called Electric Vehicles Council They think the sales of purely battery electric vehicles will go up once the federal government's new vehicle efficiency standard begins to influence the market from next year. So that's one of Albo's commitments. We mentioned that with the uni story that's coming up after our headlines today. So that'll be interesting to see. Also, in terms of what the most popular car is, just in case you're wondering, a little bit of trivia for your Monday.
Okay.
Medium SUVs remain the most popular cars on the market.
Well done to medium SUVs out there. And wrapping up today with something a little different, but we couldn't ignore the huge weekend it was in Australian sport. Starting with rugby league, the Aussie men and women have made it a clean sweep at the Pacific Championships. The Kangaroos down Tonga 20-14, while the Jillaroos overcame New Zealand 24-4.
Yeah, very nice, very good. Love that for the rugby league sides. But look, Chris, the moment of the weekend for me was undoubtedly this.
Icky Tau for Jorgensen. Max Jorgensen. No, he didn't. Oh, my goodness me. Oh, it's unbelievable. It's one of the greatest moments in Wallabies history.
That it was, and that audio, thanks to Nine, was the moment the Wallabies, Australia's rugby union side, if you're not following along, beat England at home 42-37. It was their first win at Twickenham since 2015. It was a huge match, Chris. I watched it the next morning with my coffee. Oh, what a morning it was. Look, as a long-suffering fan of the national side, this was really great to watch. And many are calling it the game of the year, not just for the Aussies, but for world rugby in general. It was a really great match.
Yeah, when I saw these results coming out over the weekend, I thought about you straight away. I was like, she's going to be so happy right now. And look, not to bring the mood down, but we're going to have to just a little bit because the cricketers had a shocker against Pakistan in their one-day series. It's the first time the Aussies have given up a home ODI series in 22 years, losing the decider in Perth late yesterday by 8 wickets.
Yeah, commiserations to the Aussies there. Look, there have been two other standout moments. Quickly, a dog belonging to the captain of Wellington Phoenix invaded the pitch in their A-League women's match against Canberra United. Here's when it happened.
Well, while we're watching that, there's a dog on the pitch. You don't often see that. Well, certainly not at this level. I think Annalie Longo, that might be Annalie Longo's own dog.
Yeah, so the dog just kept running to all the different women on the pitch. It was great. And that audio was thanks to 10.
That's actually happened to me on the soccer pitch on a Saturday. And it was the most embarrassing moment because my dog just didn't go for me.
Dog?
Yeah, didn't go for me, went for someone else. And I was like, you traitor, how could you do this to me? And look, one very last moment, I know it's a sports-heavy last headline, but one last moment that stood out to me was on Saturday, the Australian men's netball team, the Kelpies, that's their name, and they actually did some pre-match entertainment for the game, performing NSYNC's Bye Bye Bye.
Amazing. Well, if you ever wanted to be part of a boy band and do the choreographed dance, that was a chance, and they absolutely nailed it, Australia.
Yeah, look, I saw the footage. It was great. And some were calling it Australia's answer to the haka, which, sure.
Yeah, okay.
Chris, thanks for being here for the headlines. Next up, it's your deep dive looking into whether we can actually make uni free in Australia.
Student debt. You might have it or be paying it off, or you might be one of the lucky ones who went to uni during the 70s and 80s and didn't have to pay. In the last week, we've been given a small insight into what a re-elected Labor wants to do for TAFE and uni students and ultimately student debt. Of the several promises made, the key ones are wiping 20% off all existing student debt. That, on average, represents a $5,500 cut. And they want to raise the minimum earning threshold at which payment begins. Currently, if you make $54,000 a year, your repayments begin, but with the proposals, that's being lifted and you'll start paying it off if you earn $67,000 a year or more. The PM, as well as Education Minister, have been out there lobbing us punchy campaign lines like this.
This is about putting money back into your pocket. Good for the cost of living, good for this generation, and for generations to come.
And
this will help people who are just starting out, who've just finished uni, who've just finished TAFE, and they've now got to pay the bills, pay the rent, or are saving for a mortgage, or they're trying to start a family. And this will just take a bit of the pressure off and help a lot of young Australians right across the country.
But some people, especially the Greens, say it's not enough.
Student debt can't be fixed because student debt should not exist. Labor should wipe all student debt. If Anthony Albanese went to uni for free, so should everyone else.
Free uni or TAFE? That's something I can get around, as can a whole heap of other Aussies.
Education and TAFE should absolutely be free.
Absolutely should be free.
Yeah, I totally think it should be free. I wish it had been free when I was going through uni, and I don't know, can they pay me back some of the money that I paid them?
We are seeing less and less people go to uni now because HECS debt is so expensive and damaging for a long time for people. That shouldn't be a reason why people don't pursue further education past high school.
I mean, I definitely think it should be a thing, yeah, for sure. But I mean, I paid for it, so maybe, unfortunately, suck it up.
It used to be free. My parents got it for free. It's better for the person themselves to skill themselves up, and also better for the economy in the country.
In an ideal world, yes. I don't know if government can afford it.
Those last two thoughts are exactly what we'll be covering by the end of this episode. Is free tertiary education better for the economy, and can the government actually afford it? But first, why are these proposals the ones Albo's chosen to seemingly kick off his election campaign with? Here's what Professor in Practice of Higher Education Policy at ANU, Andrew Norton, had to say.
So there are now about 3 million people with student debt. So that's actually a fairly large percentage of the voting population. And I think because there's been a lot of discussion of student debt over the last couple of years, particularly driven by the high indexation rates on debt in 23 and 24, that is really transformed the politics of this. And I think the government feels like they need to reclaim the initiative by doing something about perceptions around student debt.
So the benefits for people with existing student debts are clear, but how will it impact the broader economy? Here's Professor Norton again.
The 20% cut to the balances of help debt, that will probably knock, on my calculations, probably $12 or $13 billion of future repayment income for the government. So that's quite a sizable amount of money. And obviously, unless the government cuts spending, that's going to come out of other programs, or it's going to be fewer opportunities for tax cuts. So it has these broader implications. The $67,000 threshold, that will mean people repay more slowly. Some people won't repay at all. So there are additional costs there, but the big cost is the 20% cut.
Points like that have been leveraged by critics who are adamant the policy will be unpopular among Middle Australia and older voters. Joining me now to unpack that is the Motley Fool's Chief Investment Officer in Australia, Scott Phillips. Scott, thanks for joining us on the briefing. Why do you think some voters aren't going to exactly love these changes?
Because we're selfish, generally speaking. If you're getting something and I'm not getting something, I'm not happy about it, is probably the answer. If I delve a little bit deeper, though, there's a very good question about who deserves what when it comes to uni degrees. So I did a uni degree back in the day. I'm not old enough to have had free uni, but I did have early HECS uni, and I paid that off, right? So I could, if I wanted to be a little bit this way, so hang on, I paid my full freight. Why shouldn't a student pay for their way? So that's kind of the broad, if you're talking politically or electorally, why would people be unhappy? Because someone's getting something and I'm not, is generally the answer. There is, I guess, a fair question, though, around who deserves what in terms of tax relief. You think about the fact that university is supposed to, and generally does on average, boost your lifetime incomes, usually significantly. We're talking like large six-figure increases. So the question really comes down to, if you're going to benefit from uni, should you or should you not pay for it, or should it be subsidised by other taxpayers, some of whom didn't go to uni, for example? And so there might be a question around, hang on, do we want what's effectively higher income tax relief, if you think about the full duration of those people's working lives, paid for potentially by taxes from other people who aren't necessarily getting those incomes over their lifetime?
Yeah, and look, I did a little round the grounds when this story broke, just asking people around me how they felt about these proposals and the election promises made. The biggest thing that was represented amongst those who have already paid their HECS is, well, how does this benefit me?
It's always the way, isn't it? And look, we've got to get past that, right? I mean, look, I'm here for the money, but the reality is we're in a political climate, and speaking of political climates, we've had a big couple of days where the politicians aren't used to talking to us about winners and losers. There can only be winners and winners, right? And so if anyone wins and someone else loses, that's political poison, or is seen to be. And your experience is probably the same. We've kind of gone a bit of the what about me kind of going on. And I think there is some justification in the sense that people feel like they're doing it tough and they're not getting anything. So there's some justification there. There's also a bit of selfishness, which is just straight out, well, I don't have to get something every time someone else gets something. Maybe we can look at the tax base, we can look at the spending base and say, they deserve it more than me, or they need it more than me. We've kind of lost that. Now, again, I'm not necessarily saying we should reduce student debt. As I said, there's a very good case for not reducing it because of that higher lifetime earnings. And when you only look at the debt specifically, rather than those who've paid it off or those who aren't even at uni yet, there's a very small sliver, I mean, it's probably decent, of people who are getting this relief. Uni students won't be. People who paid off their HECS aren't. And so there's an electoral lens to this as much as there is a financial one.
Yeah, and I mean, that electoral lens that you've been touching on is something that the coalition has been writing home a lot over the last week. They've come out to say that these reforms don't tackle the core issue. They say the core issue here is the high cost of tertiary education, specifically uni. The cost of an arts degree has been making the rounds in all the newspapers and all the articles about this. What reforms do you think could be taking place at the moment right now to tackle the issue of the high cost of courses at uni?
Man, there's so much here, Chris, and I'll try not to cover too much in one answer, but I think when you start with what could we change from where we are, you end up being this piecemeal kind of change. There's some really significant changes to higher education over the last 40 years, right? And I'm not going to go through them all. Don't worry about it. Your listeners don't have to freak out. But we have many, 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 many more of us going to uni than previously. So the cost of higher education to the country, including the government bit and the individual HECS or help bit, is much larger in aggregate than it's ever been and will probably get larger. So there's a really significant growing cost there that we need to think about. There is also the simple reality, mate, that we're used to thinking about education in institutional structural terms. That is tertiary education, Sandstone Uni, 3-year degree, certificate at the end, large HECS debt at the end. And there are questions about, is that really the best? We want education for people. I think that's right. Lowercase e education. That is, let's upskill our people, give them the opportunity to better themselves, let them learn new skills, become more employable, hopefully qualify for higher wage jobs. Those are the right things at a lowercase e. But a capital E education, do we all benefit from going to uni? Here's the hard part for me, right? Education for its own sake is really important. We know that broadening the mind is a bit of a cliche, but it's really, really valuable, and we don't want to lose that. On the other hand, we also talk about it being a ticket to a job or a ticket to social mobility. Now, those things are true if I've got it and you don't. But if we both have it, then neither of us get ahead of the other one. So then we're looking to another degree or another qualification or another way to get ahead. So it goes from being an opportunity to improve to the thing you have to do just to be in the race, just to be in the story. I did a commerce degree, mate, and I probably the right degree given my job these days, but I didn't do it because I was so in love with it or because I thought necessarily I wanted a particular job and needed a degree for that. But I looked around and thought, hang on, everyone else is going to uni. Everyone else is doing commerce. When I go to my first job interview and they say, well, Jack's got one and Jane's got one and you don't have one, Scott, I'm sorry, you're not going to even make the cut for an interview, let alone the job shortlist. I'm thinking, well, uni's a ticket to the dance now. And that's the hard part. We're educating more people because we think we're improving their opportunities and we're improving their lives. But if everyone's doing it, we just raise the bar. It becomes an arms race of sorts. And so that's where lowercase e education, i.e. how do we give people the opportunity to learn, to develop, to grow, is vital for Australia, for our future prosperity. Really, 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 really important. Do we need to have as many or more people go to capital E education, to tertiary institutions for the structure and debt and frankly the cost of the taxpayer as well? I'm less sure. And that's probably controversial for some. It won't be controversial for others. But if we're really thinking about what is it for and what are we trying to achieve, we want some people going to uni, frankly, study arts and philosophy. That sort of stuff is really useful. If I'm a commerce guy, do I really need to study at uni for 3 years to learn enough to get an entry-level job in business? Probably not. And so getting that bit right might be the best ticket to bringing down costs for individuals and costs for society without losing the opportunity to get educated and to get ahead.
Yeah, and arguably, the Albanese government, part of this electoral promise around student debt is that they will make 100,000 places in TAFE free for people, wanting to go and upskill themselves and get themselves trained in a trade and things like that. But I do want to turn to the criticisms that the Albanese government has faced from the Greens and from certain Australians. They're saying this is a positive step. Cutting student debt is a positive step. However, it doesn't go far enough. Senator Marine Faruqi has called for free university. She said, if Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister, can get free uni, why can't Australians now? How realistic is it to make university free again in Australia?
It's absolutely doable. Here's the economic reality, right? You won't hear politicians say this. We can have anything we want. We just can't have everything we want because we don't have tax revenue to pay for it all. So we have to make choices. We either say we'll have that instead of that, or we'll have that and we'll tax more to pay for it. Those are completely possible. We could turn that switch tomorrow, right? We could say to everyone, guess what? You're all paying, I'll pick a number, 5% more tax, and we've got free uni for everybody. Hooray, let's go. Now, if 51% of us said, let's do it, we could do it tomorrow. Now, it'd be a bit of time recruiting lecturers and building unis, but, we could do it. The question really is it's not fundable under the current structure without finding other ways of generating tax revenues because it's going to cost a small fortune. I think the other thing, though, you mentioned TAFE, and that's important. The bit that I think the Greens are missing, and I don't mean this in a political sense, is that lowercase e education. Think about the world as it is versus when Anthony Albanese went to uni, you had to get a physical copy of a textbook. You had to go to the lecturer in person. If you wanted to contact your lecturer, you dialed his office phone and the receptionist put you through. These days, we have this thing called the internet, right? And that opportunity to say, well, actually, do we need, I don't know how many, 20-odd universities in Australia and a couple of thousand around the world inventing their own coursework, which is largely a copy of each other's, not directly, but they're teaching the same things. Let me use my example. Microeconomics 101. It is not hard. You don't need 1,000 course creators creating their own coursework, their own details, their own textbooks. Firstly, you can just do it once. Secondly, it's available free. And so I'm not saying the school of YouTube necessarily is the answer either, but think about what do the Greens really want? If they want everybody to be educated rather than having a degree, because they're not the same thing necessarily, right? What's the best way to do that? I could probably learn what I learned at Uni for Commerce. And again, it's about, other degrees are very, very different. I don't want someone learning medicine from YouTube. Really important. We do this right. Qualifications are important where they matter. But some of those degrees, you can get as much as you need from the internet or from an open university. You can audit courses at MIT and Harvard for free and pay $50 for a certificate at the end if you want to. And so I think we need to think very carefully about, are we fetishizing uni, capital U uni, everyone has to go there? Why? Because I went there, because Albo went there, because Marie Faruqi went there? Maybe. And I'm not saying we necessarily shouldn't, but we can think very differently and creatively about how do we give everyone the skills we want, make it cheaper for them, not just the taxpayer. Finish a commerce degree with a $10,000 debt rather than a $100,000 debt. You learn almost as much or exactly as much. I think there's better ways of thinking about what education means, how we fund it, and what we can use that money for example, TAFE, or scholarships to uni for those kids who actually deserve it and need it, rather than everybody getting the same funding to do a sandstone course degree just because that's what we've always done.
Paying slightly more tax to fund free tertiary education. Let's find out how my focus group feels about that.
I think we should absolutely do that because more kids need to go to university so we get the next generation of doctors and lawyers and all the smart people.
And how do you feel about it being tax funded?
Nah, find another way. Find another way.
Obviously, if I'm a student, amazing free education. I absolutely love that. But now I'm in the workforce and I'm a taxpayer. I'd be pretty PO'd if someone's going to do 15 different courses just to keep going to uni to just continue their education and I'm paying for it.
No, actually, I don't want it to be on my taxpayer dollars. If they can go to someone else, that'd be great. People that earn more money should pay for the people who have less money to go to TAFE and further education.
I think there's an idea that having to pay more tax is necessarily a bad thing, but if you're getting something that is going to benefit society in a positive way and bring a larger economic benefit back to the country, then surely it evens out at the end.
I mean, we probably pay our taxes to really weird things at the moment. Why not expand it to something better?
Scott, is student debt the something better?
One day you and I will have to sit down and talk about tax more broadly. But that's absolutely right. There are a lot of things we should be doing better and differently to both those people who spoke to you. The problem is none of us trust that government is spending our money well. And so that's where the kind of, I don't mind paying tax, but I'm paying too much because I know they're wasting it. That bit's a real issue to deal with. And then to your point, who should be paying tax and how much of it? Our resources are taxed way too lightly. Multinational tax avoidance is way too high. We can look at company tax, higher income earner tax, GST. There's a whole lot of things we could and should do. That's what I said before about we can pay for anything we want. We just got to work out who's going to pay for it and what aren't we going to do if we're going to replace some spending with other spending. It's all completely open. And frankly, as you kind of rightly suggest, maybe not letting people get away with dodging tax and using some of that money to educate the populace, that's probably a pretty good thing.
Scott Phillips, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us on The Briefing.
Thanks for having me.
Well, there you have it. Free uni and TAFE is a possibility, but it's just one idea being floated around to tackle student debt. Of course, there's also Albo's proposals, and after listening to this episode, where do you stand? Let us know on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. We always love hearing from you. And if you found this episode interesting, why not send it to a mate who might enjoy it as well? Either way, thank you so much for listening. We will be back in your feed with another episode this afternoon from 3. I'm Chris Spyrou. Catch you next time.
Listener.